Hey everybody, this is Emily and Christina with Destiny City Film Festival. I'm founder and executive director.
And I'm the assistant manager for the festival.
And we are honored here to have four special guests for the feature documentary Surviving the Silence, which plays in our festival. And it's, like I said, an honor to have everyone here. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves, starting with Cindy.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting our film to come and screen and for having a chance to chat with y'all for a little bit. I am Cindy Abel, and I am the filmmaker, the director and producer behind this film. And I had the honor of being able to capture Colonel Pat Thompson and Barbara Brass and Colonel Grethe Cammermeyer's story.
And we'll go with Colonel Pat and Barbara.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Pat Thompson, or Colonel Pat Thompson, and happy to be here. That's it.
I am her wife, Barbara Brass, and I have to say that she just came home from an emergency root canal. So if things don't get through clearly, it's partly that. But we're really glad to be here.
We're really grateful that you could be here with us. Thank you. And Colonel Grethe.
Yeah, I may have a dog in the background. Yeah, I'm Colonel Grethe Cammermeyer, and was sort of involved in this because Colonel Thompson was president of the board that discharged me and was depicted in the movie Serving in Silence.
Thank you all so much. It's interesting kind of seeing how all the stories are connected, and we're looking forward to talking more about that. And curious just from the start how the project came to be, how you all got to get connected, and how did this documentary project get off the ground?
I was screening my very first film, Breaking Through, which is about openly LGBT elected officials and the struggles and triumphs that they experienced at a college, Sierra College. And these two nice women came up to me afterwards, introduced themselves, Barbara Brass and her wife, Colonel Pat Thompson, and then started to share their love story and how they had been together for, at that point, about 30 years and survived a military career. And I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? I mean, it's like, how many people do you know who stay together for that long, right? And then on top of it, to have to pretend at certain times, many times, that you're not actually together. So I was fascinated by that part, and I fell in love with their love story. And then as Barb started to tell me a little bit more about what they were going to share the following night, and the involvement with Colonel Grethe Cammermeyer and kicking her out of the Army, I thought, oh my God, why do I not know this story? I mean, I had seen her film, Serving in Silence. Glenn Close played her. Barbara Streisand executive produced the movie. And I thought, this is the story behind that story, and I just have to know more. And so the next night, Colonel Pat and Barb were sharing their story in front of the Sierra College audience. And I took my camera and I just started filming because I thought there's got to be something here. I want to know more about this. And then it just kept rolling from there.
So you just went straight for it. You said that I know this is what I need to be capturing. This is the story I want to be sharing. Mm-hmm. That's great. And so I'm curious how, Pat and Barb and Greta, how you all felt, having a documentary made about your story. When that first came up, what were you looking forward to, or how did you feel about that?
Well, I personally was excited because it was a new experience, and that is something I'm usually up for. When we told our story, we had planned and did often go to other venues to speak, churches, schools, civic clubs. And when we realized that a movie would be coming out, maybe we wouldn't have to do that as much. We could send the movie in our stead and have that speak for us. And it is now, and it will continue to long after we're even able to speak. But when we decided to share our story, the first request from the professor at Sierra College was, can you get Colonel Grethe Cammermeyer? And we tried, but she wasn't available. So we thought maybe we could just do a story about how the spouses of some of these high-ranking officers, LGBT officers, are having to survive the silence that they're under. And that was our theme. We started out with "Invisible No More" was the title at that evening, and it went from there.
And, you know, like Barb, I was excited about it. It was a brand new experience, and we were both ready for that. And after we had, you know, talked about it and had been asked to do the film, we just thought, oh, wow, this is something new and different, but something exciting. So we're so glad that we have been a part of it. We feel that it's really wonderful for historical purposes for those who come after us that won't know what our struggles are, you know. So.
Absolutely. I totally agree that this is such an important story now and for, you know, generations that come later, who care about their community and the people they love. And so it's an inspiring story, and I'm so glad that I know it a lot better now. And Colonel Grethe, I mean, having a fiction film made about you, and then you're in a documentary with, I mean, how are those experiences different or the same, or?
Well, you know, the movie came out in 1995 when being gay was an illness. It was, you know, frowned upon. You couldn't serve in the military, and so it was humiliating, to say the least, and yet important to be able to describe what our sort of traditional lives were like, and that you could serve with dignity and have a long career without any adverse impact. So it was, you know, for me, it was, you know, changing the dialogue, changing the perception that people had about gays and lesbians. And I have to say, you know, I had absolutely no idea how things would evolve, but I also had no idea that the president of my board was a lesbian. And so that was such a shock to me that I don't think that I would ever have continued to ask her to sit as president of the board if I had known that in advance.
I'm glad I could be there. I'm glad I was there.
So am I.
Yeah, it was a difficult thing to do to you. I didn't want to be there, didn't want to do it, but I'm so glad that you got reinstated.
Well, and I mean, you were, as depicted in the film, you were really so instrumental in allowing us the time, and my attorneys the time needed to get the documentation to present to you and the board, so that when we, knowing that we'd put you in an untenable situation, that we were ready to go into the federal court and appeal it there. Because, as people may or may not know, if you're going to go and appeal a case, you cannot present new information. So the important thing is that you have essentially all of the ducks in a row. And because Pat stalled and really allowed us and my attorneys, obviously, to do that, we were able to prevail in federal court.
Yeah, remind me, how long was the process to get you reinstated then?
It was a little over 2 years.
Okay.
Because it had to go through all of the legal and appeal processes and everything else. And when I went back in, you know, I was well received there. So it was the non-issue that we all knew that it was, but that was important for me to go back in, sort of, because it was not the military that was, you know, the bad guy. It was the policies that that existed at the time.
When the board started, Grethe's commander said, "Please, whatever you do, please do not take this nurse away from me." She was needed. She was well liked, and I'm sure she did a splendid job for them.
So what do policies look like now? How have they changed? I mean, obviously they've changed, but and in what ways have they changed in terms of openly serving in the military?
Well, if you start from the start, gays were never really open, were never allowed to be open in the military up until 10 years ago. And, then there was the order in 1942 that specifically said homosexuality is incompatible with military service. And it was under that law, if you will, that Colonel Cammermeyer was kicked out. And it was under that law also that Colonel Pat was serving and, had to tiptoe through the raindrops, as she and Barb say, in order to not get caught and be in the situation that Grethe was in. And then came that horrible compromise called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and everybody forgot about the don't pursue part of it. And, so more people were kicked out of the military than before. And then once it was repealed, there's still, even today, 10 years after the repeal signed by President Obama, there are people who are still serving in silence and are still hiding. And thanks to the executive order a few days ago from now President Biden, transgender military members can serve openly. But my guess is that a lot of them are also still serving in silence. It definitely steps in the right direction. And it shows why it's so important to go from an executive order, which was how openly trans service members were able under President Obama to serve. Then that was repealed by an executive order. And then now it's reinstated by an executive order. So there needs to be a law, that goes beyond all of that. So it's that much more difficult to overturn in the future.
We were not acknowledged by the Trump administration. We didn't exist as far as they were concerned. They wiped their computers of anything having to do with LGBTQ within 2 days of his inauguration. So it's nice to have the new administration up there now.
So I think about how much policy does impact our day-to-day life. And of course, in the military, you live and die by policy and procedure. And I'm just curious, what would be in the best case scenario? What kind of policies could be enacted for the military in order to really support a community and an environment where LGBTQ can serve openly with pride?
Grethe or Pat, do you want to answer that one?
Well, we're getting there. I mean, right now, you still have the natural biases, sublingual or subliminal biases that individuals have. And the only way to work your way through that is by having us present and doing our jobs. And, so for the past 10 years, as Cindy mentioned, gays and lesbians have been serving openly, but they themselves may still have their subliminal homophobia themselves and expecting that there would be adverse effects within the military. And so it seems to me that the younger military does really much better because they have been raised with gays and lesbians as part of their community and media and everything else. And we're sort of working our way through it. And that the same thing will be applied to the openness of the trans service members, many of whom have continued to serve, but now to be able to do it openly means that they don't have to fear for their careers. Doesn't mean that there aren't people who are going to be biased, but at least their jobs should be preserved.
We have some friends who are married and have been, serving together in the military, or their spouse, you know, the one who is military, and they've been serving in other countries as well. So I think that's a good thing.
Openly serving
Yeah.
and not having any issues.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I think that there's, of course, always room for massive improvement, but thank you for sharing a little bit of kind of the dream and the hope to move forward. I'm curious about maybe talking about a little bit of the feeling parts of the film. Thinking about maybe the first time, Grethe, Pat, and Barbara, when you first saw the film for the very first time, was there a moment when you were watching it back and it just really hit you emotionally and you weren't really expecting? Was there a certain scene that you saw that just really kind of knocked you flat? Maybe tears came that you weren't expecting. I'm just curious to hear what that was like.
I particularly like the scene where Grete's mother, when Grethe was an infant, would take her for a ride in the baby carriage, and she would have guns underneath Grethe, and then she would pull off into a little area, and somebody would take the guns, and then she would just go right on, you know, as if nothing had happened. I love that. I just love that.
Well, I have to say that when Pat talks about why she decided to join the military, because her brother who was living was not allowed to go by their parents, but her brother who died in his honor. And whenever I hear her talk about that, and we're writing a book and we just went over that passage yesterday, and I just cannot help but cry when she talks about it and when I read about it, because it's such an impact on the emotional state of somebody who is honoring their fallen sibling in the most ultimate way.
I think for me, my bias is when I had an opportunity to talk to Pat directly, to tell her how important her participation had been in that whole process. And, you know, there was the intensity of telling her that, but also for me, it was the flashback on the experience itself of losing my military career, essentially. And that was difficult, and it still is. And reinstatement doesn't take care of the fact that you were discharged and lost every opportunity you had. And, you know, for me, it was, I lost a little bit of faith in that the military takes care of its own.
I can understand that. Yeah, I can imagine those feelings. And Cindy, for you, I don't know, watching the first time, like fully, not just clips or whatever, watching it as an audience member, what was that like for you? Did anything stick out that you kind of surprised you?
Nothing surprised me. But what continues to surprise me is every time that I watch it and I hear Colonel Cammermeyer, when she's talking with Colonel Thompson, for the very first time, by the way, they had never talked about this before. So 20 years later, they allowed us to film just their conversation. It was incredible. But I still get chills when I, see her lean in and say, we won because of you. And that to me is like the big crescendo moment that we intentionally underplayed because it stood on its own. And so, to me, that's a big part of establishing Pat Thompson's role in our history. There are people who worked behind the scenes and people who worked in front of the scenes. And with Grethe and Pat, you have one of each. And neither would have been the same without the other. And I think that that's something that's so important to remember. And the other thing that always grabs me, and I talk about this as a love story that reveals unknown history, right? And so the love story between Pat and Barb that continues to this day, and that Barb, who wanted to be out, who I can very much relate to, you know, being an activist and up front and out there and not taking any crap off anybody, she chose to put all that away for love. And I've never, you know, we were embedded with them at different times. Never ever did I see her have any resentment towards Pat for what she chose to do. And that to me is so amazing. It was like, it was her choice. She did it. She wasn't mad at Pat. She might be mad at the government, but she never was mad at Pat. And that, to me, is just fierce love, not just the nice romantic kind, but the, you know, the kind that just grabs you and allows you to truly say that love wins.
I couldn't have said that better. That was, yes.
Getting a little misty over here.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to, you know, watching the film, the commitment and the dedication between the two of you is just so apparent, and you can just see it. And yeah, it's inspiring. And that, you know, coupled with your activism and fighting for what you believe in and for, you know, your community and yourselves and your family is just as inspiring. And so, I mean, all three of you, like I said, we are just beyond honored to be sharing time with you, and grateful for everything that you have done and accomplished for LGBTQ folks, especially in the military. And we've touched on how, you know, we still have a ways to go. And so I'm curious, what would you say to younger folks who are inspired to become active in their community or fight for certain rights, or, you know, something like that? What advice would you give to them?
Oh, I would say do it. Absolutely do it, and do it with pride and do it with honor, and get out there and fight for what you believe in. Nothing changes otherwise. So we all have to find those people out there who are willing to do it and support them. I realized that I've, in this course of the activism that we've done in the last 4 to 5 years, that you saw some clips of in the film, that I was supported by everybody in that group who came out every week and stood there with us always. And without them, without that support, well, it would have been the two of us. And that makes a statement of itself, but it was not the same. So I think people need to continue and fight for what they believe in. I wanted to just throw in this little tidbit, because when you see the film, you saw when we were out on the street, we had this horrific Proud Boy yelling and screaming at us. Well, he just ran for the Central Committee of the local Sacramento Republican Party, and he was elected, but they threw him out immediately because the Sacramento Bee just did a story on him, and they posted the picture. They printed the picture of him face down in Portland getting handcuffed. And I thought that was perfect. So they knew what kind of individual this was, who was kind of getting into the local GOP to cause trouble. And it felt so good to see that transpire in the last 3 days.
Wow, I mean, times are just so interesting right now, with everyone being so fervent in their beliefs, and it's such a pivotal time in our history. And so Colonel Grethe, I'm curious, do you have advice for any young folks who want to get involved in activism or anything like that?
Well, I think there are a number of things. One is that you have to live your own truth. And that means that you have to be out, but you also don't necessarily have to be in the middle of everything, as long as what you do is the very best that you can, and that you represent sort of all of you. I think is really important, as well as the fact that until everyone is free and equal, no one is.
Very well said. I agree. I appreciate that. I think that the future is bright. You know, I think the younger generation has a lot of promise. That's kind of my perspective on it. And I hope that we continue to progress and get to that point where everyone is free and equal in every way, of life and everything that they're doing. Do you have any more questions?
Yeah, but we would be here for several hours with more questions. But no, I'm good, Emily.
Okay. Was there anything else? I mean, are there any, you said I remember you said you're writing a book, Pat and Barbara. You want to tell us about that?
Well, we did start writing this book about 5 or 6, seems like longer ago. And we finally decided that since we almost wasted this whole year of lockdown by not doing anything, we had to get going. So we contacted our editor, and she is using her tricks to get us to move. And we started yesterday by going through and rereading and starting to make some changes. It's going to be a process and it'll take a while, but it has, we decided we really needed to do it. And the book will have a lot more than what you see in the film. Some of the secrets that didn't come out in the film, a few secrets that not even anybody knows. So, you know, it'll be worth the wait to read it. And we hope to get it done in the next year or so.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. That'd be great to learn even more about the story. Is there anything in particular that you hope audiences take away from watching the film?
For me, it's that they get that love wins. It might take 30 plus years, but love wins, and it is possible. And also that it's important for people to be authentic. And as former Congressman John Lewis used to say, we must make a way, we must find a way where there is no way. And that's what Colonel Thompson did. And that's what Colonel Cammermeyer did, because she rose to the challenge. She could have withdrawn her statement. She could have said, oh, I didn't really mean it. I was confused that day. No, but they both rose to this moment in time and became part of creating what is now our history. And it's one of those things where we all have a role to play. And sometimes we think, well, what can I do? I'm just, little old me. Well, every single step that we take in the direction of truth, of openness, of integrity, of love, has a ripple effect, and it ripples out, and we don't know where it's going to end up. But when it's combined with what everyone else is doing, it really can change and can impact a culture. And I hope that we continue to do what we've been doing for the last 4 years, as some of us in our country at least, and that we keep moving in that direction and not just go, oh, okay, great, we're back to normal, we're back to usual. Well, normal wasn't working so well for a lot of people. That's why we had this big, huge shift. So we need to continue to live with honesty and integrity and to find ways to express our common humanity.
I think the only thing I would add to our conversation is that surviving the silence and serving in silence were only a spear, the tip of the spear, because of the thousands of others who lived through similar experiences but didn't get the notoriety, and they didn't have an opportunity to fulfill their military obligation or military service, and we would not be where we were if it hadn't been for all of those thousands who participated in the journey. And for the 14,000 that were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Pat and Barb survived. And so they only, they reflect at least those many who were discharged. But then it was the thousands others who had continued to serve.
Nicely put, Greta. Thank you.
I don't really know what to say to that. That's, pretty incredible, an incredible story, so important. And I'm thrilled that our audience will get to know it and to get to know you, and to learn, about what's happened and where we're going. Our festival is all about sharing films that move us in a positive direction and share stories that bring us closer together and get to know, build community. So this is definitely part of that. I'm, again, super grateful for your time, and for all you've done, everything that you do and who you are, and for sharing your story and sharing your film with us. With that, we'll wrap it up. I wish we could talk longer, but again, thank you so much, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.